Right now in the UFC, we're right in the goddamn middle of a turning of the new age. The new generation, the new era, if you will, finally seems like they're really starting to take over. And I mean, look at the welterweight division alone, for example. Like all the old heads that were on top for so long or that were fighting for belts and have been kind of claiming that top 5 to 10 for so long are now kind of making their way down or out of the rankings completely. And now it's just filled to the absolute brim with prospects. And some of them, you can't even really call them prospects anymore because they're making it so damn high. So it got me thinking today I'm going to be going over who, in my opinion, I believe is the best prospect from each UFC weight class, starting with flyweight and ending with heavyweight. Now, to make this kind of fair, I'm not going to be including anybody that's already in the rankings unless they're at that number 15 spot alone. But if they're any higher than that, I can't include them in this list. That's a little rule I put on this shit. So just starting off with the flyweight division, Joshua Van, 5-1 record in the UFC, and he's only 23 years old. I'm genuinely a Joshua Van fan, bro. Sorry, the reason I'm laughing, that literally took me fucking 4 takes just to say Van and fan without fucking stuttering. But this dude has an entertaining fight style, man, and I'm pretty sure he has the most significant strikes landed per minute record right now in the UFC. Granted, he doesn't have too many fights in there, but man, this guy has a crazy high output and a crazy high volume that he puts on guys. And I can appreciate a fighter who fucking gets the hell after it, man. He's swinging and banging. Now, granted, there's a few flaws here, but for the most part, he puts on fun fights. Not the biggest finisher in the world. I believe he only has one in the UFC. But I mean, again, the guy delivers and he puts on good performances and he just fucking goes head first, man. He had one of the rounds of the year against Charas at 306. So the volume he loads on guys is absolutely crazy. He's primarily a striker, so that's mainly going to be his thing. But also from what we've seen on the ground, offensively and defensively on the grappling side of things, he seems pretty solid. So overall, yeah, he's going to want to keep most fights on the feet. It's his fucking style, but like he seems pretty well-rounded for the most part now. I genuinely think that Joshua Van's going to go pretty far. Like I can see him even being in the top 5 by like 2026. But what concerns me, okay, is one, the lack of power. Like I said, he has a crazy high output on the feet, and yeah, he has one knockout finish in the UFC, but despite the high output that he puts on guys, and yeah, he's been able to get a few knockdowns, he's been able to rock some guys, but like for the most part, he doesn't really have any power. And I understand that it's flyweight and most of these guys don't, but the lack of power is a real thing, and that can be concerning. And the other thing that concerns me is the fact that I understand that he's young, okay, 23, but like you're pretty much kind of built in your frame already. He's still small for the weight class. And again, when you're talking about flyweight, there is no atomweight division yet, all right? And hopefully not at all, but like Joshua Van would be fucking fit for that shit, bro. Because when you're a small guy for a weight class, yeah, that can be a real thing. But like for flyweight, when it's kind of as small as it gets, that can be a bit concerning for him, you know? And his only loss in the UFC, like I said, he's got a 5-1 record, and the only loss is to Charles Johnson, who's on a really good win streak right now. I feel like he's going to be able to crack his way into the top 10. So there's nothing wrong with losing to Johnson, and especially considering the age of Joshua Van, there's a lot of room to improve. And again, he has a solid chin. Getting cracked by Johnson isn't the craziest thing in the world, but like, and he's facing Bruno Silva next, who's ranked number 13. I actually think it's a good matchup to make. I think it's going to be a fun fight, and I think he's going to get the better of Bruno Silva. But yeah, like I said, there's a few things that do concern me about Van, but overall, I could see this guy being in the top 5 sometime late next year. And I'm a fan of his fight style, and I'm a fan of this dude. So moving on, up next to the Bantamweight division. I already know I'm going to get shit for this, all right? I already fucking know. There are good prospects at Bantamweight, don't get me wrong, and this might seem like the obvious choice, but y'all, some things are obvious because they're right, okay? And I do believe that Payne Talbot is the best Bantamweight prospect right now. He's 3-0 in the UFC, all by finish, and he's 26 years old. And I'm a big believer in this guy, so say what you will about it being kind of a basic or obvious choice, but I'm going to stand on this. Stand your base. Fucking stand your base. Okay, but I want to say this about what the UFC is doing with Payne Talbot. I really do like how they're pacing this guy out. We've seen guys like Sean O'Malley or Bo Nichols or even like a Paddy Pimblett. Like, they're kind of force their way into like a main card opener slot or getting big positions on cards, and it kind of just makes fans kind of resent them, especially when it comes to Bo Nickal. But I like how the UFC's pacing this guy out. I think they realize the star potential here, so they're kind of properly moving him up competition wise, and also like they're not just throwing him on every single fucking main card. Like, he's slowly making his way from the early prelims and fight nights slowly down to the prelims, and I think eventually this year we're gonna be seeing him in those bigger slots, but like they're not forcing it down our fucking throats. They're kind of making it a lot more natural, and I think that's gonna be good, because Payne Talbot, like I said, I'm a fan of the guy, but he's a little zesty. He's got a personality where I could see it being easy for fans to kind of just pile on him and just shit on the dude. And let's talk about just the actual style here and the actual skill set that he has. The motherfucker's good, bro. Okay, he's a fun, dynamic striker, and he puts on high volume on guys. But the thing that's different about like Joshua Van, for example, who's someone who also can overload guys with volume, is that Payne Talbot has power. We've seen him rock Cameron Simon. We see him got the impressive one-shot KO, well, one-ish shot KO over Giannis Gamori. So the dude has power behind his shots. And the Cameron Simon win, like that was a prospect versus prospect matchup from at least my memory. Like it was going to be really close going into it, but Payne Talbot made him look like he didn't even belong in the same cage. Was destroying him on the feet and was able to efficiently stand his own on the ground, and he took him out of there early in the second round. It was an impressive win, man. Now, even in his first win in the UFC, like I said, you know, Payne Talbot, fun, dynamic striker, and he's got power, but how is his ground game? From what I could tell, it's actually pretty solid. Now, that's going to be a big question mark for him because offensively, we haven't really seen too much, but defensively, he seems pretty solid down there. And even then, like I said, he's not really shown too much offensive grappling, but like his first win in the UFC was via submission, so clearly he does have skills down there. Granted, he hasn't fought the most crazy competition yet, and I'm hearing some people be like, oh, Payne Talbot, he's only fought cans. What the fuck do y'all expect them? That just to throw this guy Petr Yan right off the bat? I think he's going to go in there. I think he's going to smoke Barcelos. Now, granted, I think Barcelos is a proper step up. Like I said, I like how they're kind of pacing him up. Barcelos is pretty well-rounded in his own right, you know, kind of solid on the feet, solid on the ground, but he's not great at anything. I think that Talbot's going to go in there and show off a bit of his wrestling. I think he's going to be confident as fuck going into this one. He's a massive favorite, and he has all the skills to beat Barcelos. Granted, I think the way that fight's specifically going to end, I think it's going to be a knockout coming from Talbot, but I could see him kind of showing off the ground a bit, kind of showing off all the fucking tools in the arsenal, showing how well-rounded he really is. Now, in terms of the holes in his game, I'm not going to lie, like I said, there's a lot of question marks. Like from what we've seen on the ground, it's pretty solid, and cardio-wise, like we haven't really seen him go too long of fights or have opponents really be able to really battle test him in there. There's definitely question marks, so I do see him maybe hitting a wall. I don't think this guy is going to hit like championship heights, at least not in the next couple of years, but there's a lot of talent here. I think this year we're gonna see a lot of it. Like he's gonna go and I feel like beat Parcells. I feel like he's probably gonna fight again this summer, whether it be somebody unranked like an Adrian Yanez, or maybe they give him like a Marcus McGee or Montel Jackson, kind of those guys who are kind of lingering at the border of the rankings at like that 14-15 spot. And those two guys are fun matchups for him because I think it's winnable for them, but it's also winnable for Talbot. And then I think he might want to get a third win this year, or at least a third fight this year, probably sometime around like a November, December range. So I see Talbot being active this year. I see him getting good wins, and I feel like he's been building up a name already, but kind of relatively still unknown, so I feel like he's gonna really be putting himself on the map, and we're gonna have to see how he handles those question marks that are there in his game. But I'm a fucking believer, bro. But moving on, up next to the featherweight division. Okay, this one was by far the hardest one to decide because featherweight is filled to the fucking brim, especially lingering outside the rankings with prospects. I mean, I almost put Yusuf Salah in here. I almost put Joe Anderson Brito. I almost put Sean Woodson. But the one that I stuck by, and again, this might be an obvious choice. Don't give me that bullshit, bro. All right, I'm picking these for a reason. I'm going with Gene Silva on this one, okay? 3-0 in the UFC, all by knockout, and he's 28 years old, fighting out of the Fighting Nerds, who obviously is the camp of the year for 2024, and hopefully those guys can still pull off good wins in 2025. They're a camp that's riding a lot of hype right now, and Gene Silva's one of the ones that are leading the way. Now, I do think we haven't seen too much of the wrestling down there, so that could be a big hole in his game. He primarily likes to keep all of his fights on the feet, but when he does, he's quick up there, man. He's precise, he's got a fun style, he's dynamic, and he also has good power. He puts a high tenacity out there, and he has a good finishing ability, and he's coming off of a really good win over Drew Dober, and this is 2 goddamn weeks right after getting a good knockout win, and then he's stepping up to face Drew Dober in his home state, up a weight class. And Gene Silva, while I think he fit the mold up there, he's pretty small for lightweight standards, and he was still able to go beat Dober and got a finish on him. Now, like I said earlier, I think the biggest hole in his game is gonna be the grappling, but because we haven't seen too much of it, and he's not really the type to initiate shit down there, so it's gonna be interesting to see how he gets matched up with like maybe like a primarily based wrestler, or like even someone who knows how to mix it up well. But the Fighting Nerds, like we saw with like Carlos Prats against like a Neil Magny and others, like they prep these guys who are primarily strikers to be ready defensively on the ground. Now granted, they're not all like that. Like we see a guy like Cal Barajo fighting out of there who's very well rounded on the feet and on the ground, so they're not just all one dimensional. But Gene Silva, man, maybe he'll run into some problems one day when it comes to that kind of style, but I'm a big believer in the hype. He's gaining hype fast, and he's gonna go out there, I think, put on a show for the fans at Seattle. And then I think he's going to be fighting somebody in the rankings, maybe like a Dan Ige sometime in like the activity and quick turnarounds are clearly not a problem for this guy. So I could see this guy fighting in fucking March after that. But I think after that, yeah, maybe it's time to give him somebody in the rankings. Like I said, maybe like a Dan Ige or something. So again, who knows how far Gene Silva will go, but like he's got a fun style. He's great on the feet. He's relentless in there. And I think that the fighting nerds are going to be prepping him well for when it does come to face the wrestlers. So I'm a believer in Gene Silva. Again, this was very hard to decide on one. You could easily put so many other featherweights in here, and that's totally fine. It is a division that is so fucking full of prospects. But just moving on up next to the lightweight division, I almost put Varas Siam on here, but I'm gonna be going with Joel Alvarez, Spain's biggest prospect in the UFC. It seems like 7-2 UFC record and 31 years old. 100% finish rate from Joel Alvarez. The dude is exciting and he's constantly looking for the finish, whether it be on the feet or on the ground. We just saw against Jakar Close, he basically gave him the fucking 2-1 finish because he hit him with the flying knee that basically already took him out, and then he got him in the standing gilly and then won via sub, I believe. So the dude is constantly looking for a finish. He has a really exciting style. He's got quick, powerful striking and has a lot of good KOs as of late on the highlight reel. But when you look at his overall record, you got to realize that, man, this guy has good grappling. Most of his wins are by submission, and the grappling that we've seen in the UFC, it seems pretty solid. Now, granted, definitely there's some improvements that need to be made there, especially when you consider in the division, you got guys like Arman Tsarukyan, a Charles Oliveira, and Islam Makhachev paving the way for that top three. But Joel Alvarez is well-rounded as a motherfucker. He's exciting in there, and again, the high finish rate is absolutely insane. When you remove Ilia Topuria, who's literally the champion right now, and you're kind of debating, is he Georgian, is he Spain, whatever the fuck, but I think Joel Alvarez is Spain's biggest prospect right now. Like, I feel like if they were ever going to take a card to Spain, hopefully Joel Alvarez can put on some good fights in the meantime, so that by the time that card does actually happen, hopefully he's kind of in that top 10 range. It could put on somebody, maybe like, I know a lot of people want to see the Jalen Turner fight, but there's a lot of good matchups for Joel Alvarez in there, and hopefully by the time the Spain card does come around, he's kind of higher up in the rankings than he is, because again, Spain's biggest prospect right now, and this is a guy that, you can get a lot of marketing out of this fucking dude, man. He's got a good highlight reel, and I feel like he's going to be continuing to impress us. He's explosive, he's relentless, he puts on a good pace, and he's able to maintain it. Like I said, 7-2 record, meaning he has already lost 2 times in the UFC, but you got to consider one was in his debut to Damir Ismagulov, and that's his debut, and Ismagulov was a guy who kind of seemed like he was riding a lot of hype at the time, and then the other one is to Arman Tsarukyan, who I really fucking hope it doesn't happen, but this weekend he could literally become the lightweight champion over Islam Makhachev. So there's nothing wrong with losing their debut, and there's nothing wrong with losing to a guy like Tsarukyan, who's the genuine, real #1 contender right now and is also in his prime. So I think that the future is fucking bright for Joel Alvarez. How far he'll go, I could see him reaching top 5 status, man, especially when you consider these guys that have always been in the top 5 the past few years, like a Gaethje and Oliveira and a Poirier. Like, they're making their way out, and Joel Alvarez is leading the new wave for the lightweight division. I think he's going to go pretty far. So moving on up next to the welterweight division. Okay, dude, I'm going to get shit for this one. I'm going to get heat for this one because of his most recent performance, but I'm standing by this shit. Bryan Battle, baby. Okay, 7-1 UFC record, and he's 30 years old. Okay, let's just get this shit over and let's just talk about the fight against Randy Brown at UFC 310. It was a lackluster performance, and coming from a guy that was, for a lot of fans, one of the fights that people were really looking forward to the most. It was on paper going to be an absolute fucking barn burner, but it just really did not deliver. Most of the fight, I believe, was spent in the clinch, and it was a boring performance, and a lot of people were arguing robbery for Randy Brown, and obviously that wasn't a good look either for Battle. But so it was a boring fight that a lot of people thought he lost. It was a close decision, but that was just one performance. That was his most recent performance. When we look at the overall UFC record and the performance he's been putting on in the UFC, this dude is entertaining, man. And also, man, he's got a good personality as well. He knows how to talk his shit. He's marketable. He's good on the mic. He's got good interviews, whether it be on fucking podcasts or shit, or whether it be right after we fucking done beating ass in the cage. I like how he's kind of building himself up as this little hero right now, and I'm a big Bryan Battle fan, but I don't think I'm like throwing him on here just because I'm a fan of the dude. Like, when I'm looking at the prospects of welterweight who aren't already in the rankings, but just because Bryan Battle is coming off of a rough last performance, like, that doesn't mean I'm just gonna completely flop off the fucking hype train. I'm standing by this. This dude has good striking, but he also can clearly hold his own on the ground. It's not like he's the biggest power puncher in the world. It's not like he overloads guys with Valium. It's not like he puts puts on the craziest pace, but he has good striking, he has good wrestling, and he's well-rounded. He can take fights to the distance, he knows how to get finishes as well. And let's talk about the performance before the Randy Brown one. He knocked out Kevin Jousset in his home country, and Kevin Jousset in his own right, granted, wasn't the craziest prospect in the world, but he was a good prospect that a lot of people thought he was going to win that fight. Bryan Battle is a guy who's well-rounded, he has a good personality, he's marketable. How far is he going to go? I don't know if he's ever going to reach like that top 5 status, but I think he's good enough where I can see it. But we're going to have to see how he does when it comes to kind of like that upper echelon of the division. Let's put him against a Carlos Prates. Let's put him against a Vicente Luque. Let's put him against a Jeff Neal. I think it's time for Bryan Battle to kind of get his shot at the rankings. Whether I understand it was a bad last performance, man. I get it, but I think it's about time. He's got a good chance of going far if it all comes together for him. So moving on up next to the middleweight division. So I originally had RoboCop Rodriguez on here, but I ended up changing it. And I know that this guy's coming off a loss. I'm pretty sure he's the only one on here that's coming off a loss, all right? But I'm gonna be going with Ikram Aliskerov, 2-1 in the UFC and 32 years old. Let's talk about the Whitaker loss real quick, okay? Because I understand that's the big thing now when you think of Aliskerov, you're thinking about that. Now, I think that Robert Whitaker, whether it be on short notice for Aliskerov or not, I think Whitaker would win that fight 9 times out of 10. And I don't think that's anything against Aliskerov, though. Like, I just think Whitaker is that fucking guy. He's the third best middleweight of all time. And when he hasn't lost to guys like DDP or Adesanya, who DDP is on a fucking tear right now, and Israel Adesanya is the second best middleweight of all time. And then he just recently lost to Khamzat Chimaev, who is the fucking boogeyman of the UFC and one of the most dangerous grapplers we've ever seen. Other than that, like, basically, if you're beating Robert Whitaker, you are very fucking good. And for whenever he comes back from these losses, he usually racks up a few wins. And he's a former champion. So Robert Whitaker is just, I feel like, that good. And especially, like I said, 9 times out of 10, even with a full camp from Aliskerov, I think Robert Whitaker wins that one. But like, it was on short notice, okay? And that's a real thing. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. He lost. And I think that a fighter can gain a lot from these losses, man. And especially when you're going against elite competition like Whitaker. Now, granted, the fight only lasted like 80 seconds, but there's still a lot to fucking learn there, man. So even with the Whitaker loss, I think that Aliskerov is a pretty solid prospect for the division. There's no fucking shot I was putting like Bo Nickel on here, y'all. I'm sorry. Aliskerov is a guy who has a good sambo background. He has good knockout power and striking. Even earlier in his career, I don't really think any in the UFC besides the Contender Series, but even then he racked up a few submission wins, so seems pretty well-rounded for the most part. But obviously he's going to want to keep most of his fights on the feet. That's obviously where he shines. Like I said, he seems pretty well-rounded, and I think he can go pretty far. But let's talk about what concerns me here. The hole in his game. Less of a hole in his game, but more so what concerns me, okay, is his chin, okay? Because short notice or not, and I said fucking a million times, like, Whitaker beats him 9 times out of 10, but, like, Whitaker is a guy, for as good as he is, he's not a finisher, okay? Granted, yeah, he knows how to put a good pace on guys and put on good pressure, and yeah, he can get finishes, but, like, Robert Whitaker is not known for that shit. And this win over Aliskerov was his first finish in, I think, like, 5, 6, 7 years, some shit like that. So if you're getting knocked out, brutally, by the way, by Robert Whitaker of all people, the chin is definitely a big concern. I think the only other time he's lost or really been finished at all was to Khamzat Chimaev, and that's a guy who's got a lot of power behind his shots, and that was way earlier in both of those guys' career. But like, the chin concerns me, but if his chin is able to hold up, I think he's able to go pretty far. I could see him cracking the top 10 sometime, maybe even this year, probably sometime next year though, depends. I know he's got a fight against Andre Muniz for that Saudi Arabia card, and I think that Aliskerov is going to win that one. This is definitely the prospect on this list that I feel like I have the least amount of faith in, but and again, I almost put RoboCop on here, but I just decided to go with Aliskerov. It just felt like the better choice. As good as I think RoboCop is, and I think RoboCop's going to go beat Cannonier and kind of make his way into the top 10 soon. In his next fight, I think he's fighting literally like 2 weeks after Aliskerov. So yeah, I'm just picking Aliskerov for this one. The chin is very concerning, and there's holes in his game, but like, still a solid prospect, I feel like. So moving on up next to the light heavyweight division, Zhang Minyang or Minyang Zhang, whatever the fuck. So he's 3-0 in the UFC, all by first round knockout, and he's 26 years old. China finally has a good prospect on the rise, man. I feel like we haven't seen or really taken any big Chinese prospects coming up seriously since like a Song Yadong, and Song Yadong at this point has been lingering around the rankings for a while. So China, I mean, for as big as the fucking population is, it's insane that they really don't have that many fighters in the rankings or really solid prospects, but I think that their biggest hope right now is going to be Minyang Zhang. This dude has insane power. He's young and he's riding an 8 fight, oh my fucking god, an 8 straight fight, or an 8 fight straight first round knockout streak. So the power is clearly there. The striking is clearly there. He's a good size for the division. Even then, like I said, he's riding all these crazy knockouts, and especially in the UFC. But even earlier in his career, he did get a few submission wins. So, but I kind of want to take that with a grain of salt, because again, that's the regional scene. Who the fuck knows what happens when you get in the UFC? So that could be a big hole in his game. That's the thing about this guy. So if there is going to be something that holds him back, I could see it being the wrestling. We just don't really know what he's like down there. He could absolutely be shit, and maybe he is going to hit that wall, and he isn't going to go really as far as a lot of people think. But the division he's in, light heavyweight, is a division that is full of non-grapplers. Like, the main one that we really have kind of there is Magomed Ankalaev, who's obviously going to be challenging for the belt yet, well, at least hopefully. And then what's after that? Like a Jan Blachowicz, who's probably going to be retiring after his next fight, and even then, Jan's primarily a striker. It just so happens that he's well-rounded enough where he has solid wrestling. So this division really has no big grapplers. So if there's any division where a guy like this with his style is going to be best fit, I think it's the perfect fucking fit. How far he's going to go, I could see this guy getting close to like that top 5, top 10. How soon's it going to be? I have no fucking idea. And again, how's this guy's cardio? How's this guy on the ground? We haven't really seen him go through too much adversity, so we're just going to have to see. But the striking and the power is clearly there. And again, China finally has a fucking prospect, and this is a good guy to invest in. So moving on to the last one we have here for the heavyweight division, it is going to be Mick Parkin. It was a struggle for trying to find like a good heavyweight prospect here, because there really isn't a lot of them, but I'm gonna be going with Mick Parkin. He's 5-0 in the UFC, and he's 29 years old. This guy trains with Tom Aspinall, so if he ever does make it far enough, especially when you consider the lack of depth at heavyweight, and Tom Aspinall is about to become the undisputed champ if and when Jones retires, so that's gonna be awkward if they ever do have to fight one day, or if Mick Parkin gets up close, because like it's not exactly like they can exactly move up or down weight classes. So gonna be interesting what happens if Mick Parkin does ever make it that far. But yeah, so he trains with Tom Aspinall, and he's got an upcoming fight against Martin Tybura at the London card, I believe, and I think that Mick Parkin's gonna win that one, even though Tybura's coming off of an impressive win over Deniz, and he kind of fucking showed he's still in it, and maybe he's more than an Apex gatekeeper. He's not, but still, like, Tybura's going to be able to still give him problems. It's a good test for him, and it's a way for Mick Parkin to either crack into the top 10, or Tybura's going to just shut down another prospect on the rise and just prove that heavyweight is fucking dead forever, and we're going to get fucking Spivak versus Tybura, the quadrilogy in the Apex in 2027, dude. So like I said, Mick Parkin, he's a prospect where it was hard to find prospects for the heavyweight division, and Mick Parkin is just the one. He's probably the best of them all. He's pretty well-rounded. He wants to keep most of his fights on the feet, primarily is a striker, but he seems comfortable taking the fight to the ground. Pretty well-rounded fighter. Before coming into the UFC, he won all of his fights via knockout, seemed like a big power puncher, but seemingly now he's a lot more focused on the patient side of things, more on the technicality side of things. So not the biggest finisher in the world, at least we haven't seen too much of it yet, but can hold his own on the feet and can hold his own on the ground, which is pretty solid for heavyweight standards. Like I said, though, not the most impressive prospect in the world, definitely has some flaws, so I can honestly see Tybura winning, and that alone is a red flag when you're talking about a prospect on the rise. So I don't really know for sure how far Mick Parkin's going to go. He's 10-0 undefeated, I believe, but he's going to be facing higher caliber competition really soon, especially if he beats Tybura. So dude's got flaws in his game, but even then, solid on the feet, solid on the ground, trains with Tom Aspinall, and I think he's going to be able to get past Tybura at that London card. So overall, that is going to be it for all the best prospects, I think, for every single UFC weight class. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Where was I fucking right? Where was I fucking wrong? And just let me know, who do you guys think are some of the best and worst prospects in each division? So thank you guys so very much for making it this far into the video. I appreciate y'all a lot for that. By the time I'm recording this, I'm one away from hitting 700 subs, so maybe I already hit that, or maybe I didn't, I don't know. But if I did, thank you guys so very much. I really appreciate it. And again, for anyone who just made it this far in the video, subbed or not, I really appreciate y'all, so thank you very much. All the smoke, MMA, thank you guys so very much for tuning in, and I will see you all next time.